knock knock, how's it going? You ready to film today? What's wrong? I don't want to talk about it. Hey, come on, you can tell me about it. Filmic Pro turned into a subscription service and revoked our perpetual license. Ah, shit. Filmic Pro, how could you? Okay, as you saw from my cold open, so to speak, Filmic Pro, the camera app that I usually use for my YouTube videos, has decided to turn into a subscription service rather than keep the perpetual license that I initially paid for. So now I'm using a different app called Cinema P3. I don't know if I'm going to keep using this. This is a good alternative so far, but I have been thinking about getting a proper camera for a while. So we'll see where this goes. But I wanted to do my November-December wrap up. Obviously, I didn't do a separate video for each because November was really busy for my job personally. But I didn't actually read a whole lot anyway. You know, let's just do a quick one and talk about the books that I read for the months of November and December. I'm filming this just before New Year's, so I hope you've all had a wonderful holiday no matter what you celebrate, and I hope that you all have a wonderful new year coming up, 2023. We'll see where the future holds. I'm not expecting anything because we're still finding out after we fucked around because Filmic Pro decided to fuck around with their subscription service, and now we're finding out that they suck, actually. Everybody hates it. I took a peek on the Filmic Pro Reddit. Everybody hates it. Like, fuck you guys. You're not Adobe. Like, we loved you guys when we paid for it, and now we're all deleting your app. And I'm like, go off. I've also, unfortunately, deleted my Filmic Pro app. It has lasted me a good while. It's given me a lot of use for my first initial YouTube videos, but now, you know, I was thinking about getting a camera for a while, so maybe this is just the time. This is the sign to do that, to upgrade my tech, so to speak. All right, so let's just get right on into it because I do not like editing more than half-hour worth of raw footage. So most of these were library books, so I don't have physical copies except for like 2. So the first book I read for, technically I think it was the very end of October, but like my October wrap-up was already going on very long because I was baking cookies. So I decided to move it on to November. And that is Stanley Tucci's Taste, My Life Through Food, his memoir. Stanley Tucci and I are actually, we have the same alma mater. So I guess out of that like very faint connection, I just decided on a whim to pick up this book, and it was on the Libby app, and then it came up while I mentioned in my last video that I was with my mom on a very boring vacation holiday, so it was very boring, and all I did was read my book. And so Stanley Tucci's, well, basically, for those of you who don't know Stanley Tucci, he is an actor, but this book is less about his acting life and more about, as the title says, his life through food. This memoir chronicles his life in the lens of the food he makes, his mother makes, his family makes, because they're a big Italian family. The way that his father or his grandfather would make homemade stuff in their basement, the way that their mother was always perpetually in the kitchen making homemade food for them. It's also about how Stanley Tucci like learns to appreciate food as he grows up from child to adult. And then he had a bout of mouth cancer, which was very harrowing to read towards the end, and how really his appreciation for food grew more, even so after that bout of mouth cancer, because he couldn't eat for a while because he had to be fed through a tube. He couldn't eat anything. Everything tasted terrible because he was doing chemo. It was very harrowing to read, but honestly, I loved his descriptions of food, and you can really tell how much he appreciates food and loves food in the pages. There are recipes inside, and I screenshotted them, and I'm like, I'm definitely gonna make this hopefully at some point. The way he described it just makes it sound so delicious, and it was like mouth-watering. Even if like you're not really a bit, like, I came into this as a movie fan, and I also love reading about food, so honestly this was like the perfect book for me. So like if any of those things interest you, like I I would definitely give this book a read. There are just sometimes some memoirs where like it's hard to rate because it's someone's life, but I do recommend this memoir, so if you find it, give it a go. So moving on, I was in a little bit of a memoir kick, and this next book that I read was Deaf Utopia by Nyle DiMarco. If you don't know who Nyle DiMarco is, he is a model, he is an actor, and he is a deaf activist. So Deaf Utopia is about basically his life growing up deaf, growing up as a, I think it was like a third or fourth or fifth generation child in a deaf family. He grew up in Queens in a big Italian family. There's like a thing going on with these memoirs of Italian families. So it talks about his life, the life of his parents, the life of his grandparents, the way that whether you grow up in a deaf family or not makes a whole lot of difference, especially how it impacts you and how it impacts your emotion, and how like really when it comes to growing up deaf in different communities, it can really impact how you communicate. For example, his mother grew up with deaf parents, and so they were able to teach her sign language properly to communicate effectively, and that like really and the way that you grow up communicating like really impacts you as you grow up. Where his dad, if I remember correctly, wasn't taught as well. If I remember correctly, I think his dad's parents were hearing people, so they did not know how to take care of a deaf child, and so that really impacted his father's ability to communicate, and that really impacted his emotional regulation, I guess, for lack of a better word. But basically it's just like no matter what, like the way that you were taught to communicate as a young child like really impacts you as you grow up. It also talks about deaf history, deaf education, and all that stuff relating to the deaf and hard of hearing community. So I definitely learned a lot. And not a whole lot is dedicated to, I mean, it's only like really blips in his life. He's still quite young, but not a whole lot of it is dedicated to America's Next Top Model, where he was, first propelled into fame, so to speak, and then subsequently Dancing with the Stars, and then also very briefly, it was like very briefly like his stuff about going on the TV show Switched at Birth, and then also his Netflix, like I think he was the executive producer of Deaf U, which is a documentary on Netflix, which I still haven't seen, but I want to. So, and really what comes across most is that like he's not lacking of anything. He makes it very clear that even if he can't hear, he's not lacking anything. Like the way that anybody has stuff that they can and can't do, it's the same. Like he can do a lot, except he just can't hear. So this was really a very much an educational book. I found that the writing was very earnest, very much like, I think earnest is the way to put it, very optimistic as well, but also doesn't shy away from the tough parts of growing up deaf. For example, his parents were just around the time that the Americans with Disabilities Act was signed. Like our generation especially is like very lucky when it comes to disability rights. It still has a long way to go, very much so in terms of healthcare and in terms of like losing benefits, for example, when you get married. It still has a long way to go. But considering his parents' generation, they still hadn't had the Americans with Disabilities Act signed yet. So for example, I think it was a story he talked about his mother who was refused an interpreter when she was trying to take her father to the hospital. And that even was with the Disabilities Act signed, but they were able to be like, well, we tried. It's like, well, this isn't good care. So it still has a long way to go, but he talks a bit about disability rights history in the memoir as well. So it's definitely not just about his life, but also a little bit of an education as well. So I do recommend this one as well if you're interested. I just kind of happened to pick this one up. I did know of Nyle DiMarco. How did I find him again? Part of me wants to say I found him through a Damon fan cast, and I'm like, maybe. I don't know. I just kind of found him and I'm like, oh yeah, that's cool. And then I don't know. Read this book if you want, get a chance, absolutely. Moving on. The next book I read was Nona the Ninth, but I already made a dedicated video about that, so I'm not gonna say a whole lot. Just if you wanna watch my hot sauce review, also the Nona the Ninth locked to video, that is the last video that I uploaded in about 2 weeks back, and I'll link it up in the whichever corner this is. I don't know if this is gonna be mirrored or not. So the next book I read took me months to finish, and I feel a little ashamed to say it took me so long to finish, but it was The Game of the Kings by Dorothy Dennett. All right, so I don't know if I should hold this up because it's a little unwieldy, but The Game of Kings by Dorothy Dennett is the first book in the Lyman Chronicles, and all of my favorite authors and their mothers are like, please read Lyman, read the first book in the Lyman Chronicles. It's so good. Everything I write about is based on him, and I'm like, okay, I'll read it. I joined a book club for a little while, and their first book was Game of Kings, and I'm like, okay, finally, this is my chance to read it. Y'all, I'm pretty sure I've mentioned this before, that my brain is a Swiss cheese like colander. I'm stupid and everything goes over my head sometimes. I struggled. I feel like this is a thing. My favorite authors would recommend a book and I'd be like, I understand what you got out of this, but what I'm getting out of this is like not quite it. And I feel bad because you recommended this to me, and then I feel like it's like a weird betrayal. I'm a fan of you, so I want to like follow what you're recommending. So yeah, it's just like a weird betrayal, but like what can you do? I didn't like it. So this is like a solid 3-star read for me. The thing is, okay, I'm gonna talk about the good things. The thing is, I understand why people liked Lyman and his character and like base all their characters off of him. He is a sneaky little bitch. He is conniving. He is a little manipulative. He is like scheming all the time. He is thinking 10 steps ahead. He's like talking with the fluffy language of a little gay boy. And so like, I understand why a lot of the characters that like my favorite authors made are like based off of him. Like I can see the progenital, is that the word, progenital traits? I don't know. But he is sneaky, he is conniving, he's a little bitch, and he's a little meow meow, and we all love him. I understand that. However, the historical context, this is like Scotland in the year 1547, where Scotland basically is trying to gain independence from the English, as they are wont to do throughout all of history. Even though Lyman himself and also Lyman's family are all fiction, the rest of the cast of characters are more or less real historical figures, and it's a real historical context, and it was so dense, and I just couldn't. I was like glazing over. I feel so bad because there's just so many different characters. I couldn't really keep track of them. And then sometimes you're in different POVs and you don't know who they are. The more bad stuff I say about it, the more I'm afraid I'm gonna like get cast on the ire of the Lyman fandom. So I don't want to talk too much about it because it's just more or less that like dense historical fiction is not really my thing, because like I can barely keep up with a regular nonfiction book. I just like I'm even in the subjects I'm interested in, it's like I want to learn this, but like you're just talking at me. It's just not something I feel like I can grab on with my hands like with other fiction books and like, you know, play with it in my hand. This sounds so weird, but it's all figurative. But so with stuff like dense historical books, it's very much like I can't really get my fingers into this because it is just too, I keep using the word dense, but it's true. It's just, I can't put my hands into this because it's rock solid. I can definitely understand Lyman as a character, but I could not really get into the plot, the setting. I cannot tell you what the plot is of this book is about. Well, it's basically Lyman trying to clear his name. That's basically it. And there's a whole trial at the end. I'm like, just like King's Rising. Okay, so look, I think it should be read because I understand its appeal. Maybe I'll give the rest of the Lyman Chronicles a try at some point because no doubt, like fine wine, things just get better with age. Who knows? If you have a thought about Lyman, put it in the comments below. I don't want to talk too much about it or else the fandom's gonna come after me like an angry mob. So the next book that I read was The Honeys by Ryan LaSala. This one also just happened to just come up on my Libby and I'm like, okay, whatever, I'll read it. This one was a pleasant surprise of a read. So The Honeys basically follows this young teen named Mars who is gender fluid, and Mars's sister Caroline, one night while she was supposed to be away at camp, shows up in Mars's room and tries to kill him. And in the ensuing scuffle, she like falls down over a banister of stairs and like dies. And Mars is like, what happened to you? So they go to the camp. What was it called? Camp Aspen or something like that. Basically to like get to the bottom of Caroline's mysterious, like what happened to Caroline. The thing is, Caroline was a part of a clique, so to speak, called the Honeys. And the Honeys are a group of girls who live in a secluded cabin, and all they do is take care of beehives. They're like the mysterious girls. Mars manages to get within the ranks and tries to find like the mystery of the Honeys. Why did Caroline try to kill them? All that. This was actually my second attempt at a Ryan LaSala book. My first attempt was Bedazzled, and I don't know, I just couldn't really get into Bedazzled, even though it was about cosplay. I didn't really jive with the main characters. But the Honeys though, oh my god. So it is pretty much like a psychedelic horror. I would compare it similarly to like the vibes of Midsommar, because on the surface everything seems so lovely, full of nature, welcoming, because like the Honeys, like the girls of Cabin H they just like welcome Mars with open arms, and like you can tell that they're being genuine about it. I'm not gonna spoil it obviously, but you can tell they're being genuine about it the same way that like, what were they called? The Hala in Midsommar? They're genuine about who they are, even though it's like a little crazy. It gets a little psychedelic in a way, because it is a little bit of like a psychological mind bender, and the descriptions were so beautiful. And like really like you can kind of understand what's going on here the more you read on. It's not a like a sudden plot twist out of nowhere. You can see how the breadcrumbs slowly started to like form. The reveal at the end, I'm like, I get it. I'm not like, wow, it was that this whole time, but I'm like, yeah, it was that this whole time. Very briefly, I do recommend the Honeys. It is very much like that summer fall horror kind of deal. If they make a movie out of this would be really cool. Like I said, definitely along the vein of Midsommar. And so like if this is your jam, like, you know, because the thing is sometimes horror in books is kind of a hit or a miss. I think this was a hit, because like the thing is that like, you know, you can't really jump scare in a book, but this wasn't a jump scare. This was just like this slow descent into the reveal. So if you think this is your jam, then go for it. This one was a hit for me. Okay, so this next one is a little bit out of left field, but I want to talk about it briefly. So there seems to be a trend of me just picking up random books while I'm away on vacation. I was away for a weekend to Florida, and in an attempt to pack lightly, I didn't pack any books. Oops. Luckily, like I didn't really need any books during the weekend because I went to a convention. Well, the thing is, the flight there was so turbulent that I couldn't do anything more than just sit still and just like not throw up. But the flight back was much more calmer, and I was just like, I don't have any games on my phone that don't require Wi-Fi, but I do have like a couple of books downloaded on my Kindle app that I never really got around to reading. So I'm like, okay, let me just download a couple and just see where this goes. Like see if anything like can catch my interest. One of them was this book that I purchased a while back on a whim, and I shouldn't be embarrassed, but it was called Virgin Flyer by Lucy Lennox. It's like one of those romances, Kindle only books, and this apparently I think was Lucy Lennox's debut. How did I find this? I think it was like a Twitter mutual who like talked about this briefly, and then I was like, okay, it sounds interesting, I'll give it a try. And then I didn't read it for years until now, because I just needed something to do. So Virgin Flyer sounds so weird when I say it out loud. So Virgin Flyer follows this guy named Teo, and Teo, as the name suggests, is a virgin. He's a little gay virgin because he'd been holding out for his best friend for years, but in an attempt to get some experience, he decides to go on a hookup app and he says like, hold me for a night, don't talk to me, like make love to me and pretend that we are in love forever, but like I'm gonna be gone in the morning. And so the person who picks up the post on the app is named Jack. I think it was Jack. I totally forgot. It was Jack. And Jack is a pilot, so that's where Flyer comes in. Jack is a pilot and his job is so demanding that he doesn't really have time for relationships, so he goes wherever he lands in a city for a night, he goes on hookups. So he sees this and he's like, okay, he's interested. So they have like this wildly passionate night together, and they don't talk, and so Teo has some experience, and then Jack is like, oh my god, that was like the best night of my life. A couple months pass, and then Teo is a nurse, and so the person that he's helping is his best friend's grandfather, trying to get him to Germany, and the person on the flight is Jack, who switched from commercial airlines to private charters. He's like, oh my god, like a couple of months later, suddenly you're back in my life again. Oh well, we're gonna get to Germany and we're never gonna see each other again until the plane crashes. Not like wild crash, it was like, we need to make an emergency landing in Canada. The grandfather had a heart attack, so he's airlifted away to back home. Then they end up having more passionate nights together while they're stuck in Canada. And so the rest of the book is more like that, where like they're trying to figure out their feelings because Teo is still holding on to his best friend, but like he has this amazing chemistry with Jack. And overall it was a pretty good book because the spicy scenes were surprisingly actually really good, very passionate. I didn't have to wonder where limbs were. Sometimes like that's the thing about some spicy scenes, but in terms of the plot itself, it was like pretty fine. It was, you know, like figuring out feelings. I like you, but I think you like somebody else. And I wasn't surprised when I found out that this was Lucy Lennox's debut book, because like a lot of it was like filler. When it wasn't a spicy scene, there was a lot of filler, like a lot of over explanations on like other characters, the secondary cast, minor characters, plot, like a lot of over explanations that I did a lot of skimming so I could just get to the important bits, which was the spicy bits. A lot of like unnecessary details, like the things that like you want to, that like you would write down in a character chart to flesh it out, but like, you know, it's just a lot of fluff. But like turns out it was the debut, so like what can you do? I would recommend this. I mean, it's only like a Kindle novel, so it's not a whole lot, it's not like a full price book. Like I said, the spicy scenes were good, so if you're bored out of your mind on a flight back from Florida, it's perfect. I read it in 2 hours, just enough. So that is more or less what I read in the months of November, December. But I did want to bring up some books that I want to make a more full-length video of, and that is some danmei novels that I've been reading. Very briefly, danmei novels are Chinese BL novels. Usually they're web novels and then translated into English by translation groups. So for example, on Netflix there's a show called The Untamed that is adapted from 魔道祖师, which is Grandmaster of Demonic Cultivation, which was a danmei novel written by Mo Xiong Tongxu. I hope that was how you pronounce it. Whoops. Yes, I think that's how you pronounce it. I am half Chinese, but like half the time my pronunciation is terrible, and my mom likes to call me out on that. Anyway, so some of the books that I read recently, and I'm still reading, are Scum Villain's Self-Saving System, which is Mo Xiang Tongxu's first series. And I'm also reading the translations of Grandmaster of Demonic Cultivation. MXTX is the abbreviation. I'm going to use that. MXTX's work is like the gateway, so to speak. Those are the ones that got most popular first. And they are the ones that like first became licensed for official translation by 7 Seas Entertainment, which is really cool. I'm glad we can finally say that like we can finally get these translated novels. I'm going all over the place out of this. The first 3 series, the only series so far that MXTX has done, they're working on a 4th one. The first series was Scum Villain's Self-Saving System. The second one was Grandmaster of Demonic Cultivation. And then the third one is 乾坤师师傅, which is Heaven Official's Blessing. Those all three, like when the first volumes of each were like released at once, they like all made it on different spots on the New York Times bestseller list because like it was before they were officially licensed, they were translated for free by translation groups. And what's really cool is that like they didn't get new translators. They got those translators who did it for free and then got them to come back for the official translations, which is really cool. So they are still being released now. Scum Villain has 4 volumes, which is done. I believe Grandmaster of Demonic Cultivation will have 5 and then that will be done. Heaven Official's Blessing is probably gonna have like 8 because it's so long. When it was still in free translation, I only made it like halfway through because it was so long. I had reached like a particularly boring part and then I just kind of fell off. So those are like, this is like when you first introduce someone to danmei novels, like it's usually these 3 of like MXTX's work that you would recommend to someone. That's like the gateway. And then you get onto more. Now, Seven Seas is doing more. For example, they're doing Thousand Autumns, they're doing Chapeau Lang, and they're doing this one, which just came out, Husky and His White Cat Shirtun. Arha, it's called Arha. It's like the nickname. So this one that I also read because it came out, I think it was like mid-November. This is my first time reading it. I did not read it when it was in still free translation. So I'm not going to talk about it a whole lot now because I want to make a more dedicated danmei video. So if you're interested, keep an eye out for that. Definitely if you want to learn more about sea novels, there are definitely other places you can find out more about them on the internet. Hopefully I'll make that soon. I don't know if I'll be able to get a new camera by then or if I'm going to use this app that I'm using right now. We'll see. I'm talking very fast. I'm losing breath very easily. I don't know how to end this, but I'll end this with a story. So of course, my mom tries to teach me Chinese whenever a chance she gets, and she also likes to talk a lot. So then I told her, hey, I'm reading some translated Chinese novels. It's called, I'm gonna butcher it. It's called 二哈和他的白毛师尊. Okay, let me try again. 二哈和他的白毛师尊. It's okay. Chinese speakers, you're totally allowed to roast me in the comments. So I tried to tell her, hey, I'm reading this book. And then she was like, I have no idea what you just said. And I'm like, girl, saying me too. And then basically she tried to teach me how to say bai mao for like 45 minutes straight because I kept not doing the tone right. And then she was like, you have to say it like Biden. And I'm like, who? So that's a story where my mom tried and failed to teach me how to say white cat. She does not know what danmei novels are, even though I actually tried to explain it to her multiple times because like one of her favorite dramas was Winter Begonia. That is another danmei, but the novel hasn't been officially licensed yet. Winter Begonia basically is about Chinese opera. It's rather niche, but like it's a very good drama. You can find it for free on YouTube if you ever get a chance. Of course, you can criticize danmei because the thing is when it gets adapted, especially into live action TV dramas, they're often censored. So, but the thing is that like I think very much the productions do what they can. So for example, if you ever get a chance to watch on Netflix is very much a big fan of these. The Untamed, Word of Honor is another one. They try their best. And I highly respect them for that. So keep an eye out for my beginner's guide to danmei novels coming up in the future. Hopefully it won't be as crazy as me talking very fast for no apparent direction. I'm just gonna end here because I'm coming up at 40 minutes of raw footage and I do not like that. Future me is gonna hate this, but this is my last wrap up of 2022. I've had a crazy year. A whole lot has happened recently. A whole lot has happened, will happen. Tell me what books that you read. Tell me what books that your favorite books at the end of the year. I don't think I'm gonna do that like end of year tag thing. I don't know, because I'm busy. I have to go check on a cat. I don't have a cat, but I'm babysitting someone else's cat. I have to go check on him. It is his lunchtime. Kiss you fandom friends, good night. Feed your cats, and I'll see you in the next year. Bye.